My name is Cindy Rickett. I volunteer at the VA Hospital in Canandaigua, New York, and my assignment is to take Veterans Histories for the Library of Congress. I'm here today with Robert Glasgow, and he's going to tell us about his time in the Navy during World War II. Go ahead, Mr. Glasgow.
Oh, I'm Robert Glasgow. I went to Edison Tech High School and I took printing. And I thought that would be a good trade. So, after I graduated, while I was in high school, I had a part-time job at the Daily Record. And,
Is that a newspaper?
Pardon?
Is that a newspaper?
The Daily Record is a morning newspaper. So, I was accepted as to take the job. Instead of shop class, I went to the Daily Record and I had credit for my graduation. So after I graduated from high school, I stayed right at the Daily Record, and I stayed there until I retired in, I guess it was 1985. But it was a good trade. When I was in let's see now. There was a time when I was going to church on a Sunday morning, and when I came home from church, I heard that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, and I was shocked by that.
Did you know where Pearl Harbor was?
Well, I think at the time I knew it was out in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, my experience after the attack on Pearl Harbor was what happened at home. We had to darken our houses. We had, you might say, people volunteering for doing different things. We had people donating scrap metal and all kinds of stuff. And there was a time when I said, it's about time for me to get involved in this war. So I said, I was about to be drafted, and I said, I'm going to have to choose what I want to do when I'm in the service. So I said, if I don't enlist, I'll be drafted. But I figured the Navy was something that I don't know if I was interested in it, but I thought being in the Navy was a better life than being in the Army. So I enlisted on the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, and I was home for Christmas, and between Christmas and New Year's I was called up and said to go back to Buffalo to be indoctrinated into the Navy. So from Buffalo, they sent me to Bainbridge, Maryland, where I served 8 weeks as in boot camp. Well, in boot camp, you're evaluated to see what kind of capabilities, you might say, what you're adapted for. And I think they came up with the idea that I would be pretty good as a quartermaster. I had no idea what a quartermaster was until they sent me to quartermaster school, which was in Bainbridge, Maryland. So from in Bainbridge, Maryland, there was kind of a season of the year when everything was muddy. And I remember walking if you got off of the pavement, you'd always get your rubbers all muddy, and it was a heck of a job keeping things clean there. So after 8 weeks in boot camp, they decided to send me to quartermaster school, which was in, where was that place now? Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island. And I spent, around 16 weeks in quartermaster school.
Now,
And-
what kind of stuff do you have to learn to be a quartermaster?
Well, you have to learn the Morse code. You have to learn the hand signals.
The semaphore flags?
Semaphore. Yeah, have to learn semaphore. Anyway, it wasn't a tough course, but it was a concentrated course because you had to prepare yourself for sea duty, and you had no clue what sea duty was at that time. And the strange thing about being at Newport, Rhode Island was we had hammocks for beds, and we had to get used to sleeping in a hammock. Why? I have no clue. All I know is when we left Newport, Rhode Island, I wasn't about to carry the hammock all around, so I sent it home. From there, from Newport, Rhode Island, I was assigned to a ship which was based in Staten Island in the Bethlehem Steel Company. Well, they sent me to where the ship was was near Brooklyn, but it was in where did I say I was?
Staten Island.
Staten Island, yeah. Anyway, we had to find quarters to live for the time that we stayed at Staten Island. While the ship was it was built, but it had to be, all the final touches had to go into it. While we were there, I was assigned to, you might say, update maps that would be used aboard ship. So that was an interesting thing. And another thing we did while we were there, we stood watching in a warehouse at night just to make sure everything was taken care of. Nobody was disturbing anything.
Now, when you went to Staten Island, did you have to find your own lodging, or did they put you up someplace?
No, we were told that there were different homes where they were taking servicemen in.
Mm-hmm.
And a buddy of mine, and we found this house. We took the upstairs bedroom, and we stayed there until we were ready to go aboard ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting there because the Bethlehem Steel Company was where the ship was built. The ship was the Colohan. So we had liberty every night, or we could do basically what we wanted to do in our free time, which was kind of nice because when you're in school, you don't have that much freedom. We could come and go as we want. We could eat where we want, and all our spare time was do what we want. So there was one occasion where I was on a beach someplace on the coast there, and I met Doris Keogh, a nice lady, and we talked, and I said, could I escort you home? So she said, sure. So anyway, I found out where she lived, and we communicated all the time. I was in the Navy, which was nice, because it helped me get through my service time. When the ship went into commission, we went aboard ship. We found out where our living quarters were. We had no idea what the ship was all about, but we learned awfully fast. And I found out, being a quartermaster, you're on the bridge for whenever you're on watch, you're on the bridge. That's where the captain is, and that's where all the officers are. So I figured that was about the best job on the ship, and I enjoyed that. I never got questioned about anything I did. So our first assignment was to take the ship on a shakedown cruise. And on the shakedown cruise, they put the ship under strenuous situations. They check how fast it'll go, how fast it'll stop, how fast it'll turn, how strong the body is, and how much abuse it'll take. So when we were out in the Atlantic, was where we had our shakedown cruise, we stopped at the island that was what's that island in the Atlantic?
Puerto Rico?
No. Well,
Bahamas, Jamaica.
I'm not hearing it, Tim.
Bahamas, Jamaica,
No. It's an island that's
Bermuda,
Cuba.
Cuba.
Not Cuba, no. I don't know. Anyway, we got to be off the ship, and I don't know if it's going to be out here or not. Don't see it. We had liberty on this island, and after the shakedown cruise, we went back to I think the Brooklyn Navy Yard to get the ship, whatever they found that had to be adjusted or taken care of, they did that there. And from there we went to, while we were out in the Atlantic, we got into some rough seas, so I got seasick on the Colohan. And then from there we went through the Panama Canal, which was an experience because I never thought I'd do that. When we got on the Pacific side of the canal, we stopped at names escaped me. San Diego. We didn't get off the ship, but we did pull into San Diego Bay, and we took off for Pearl Harbor. When we got to Pearl Harbor, I found out that I was going to be not discharged, but transferred from the Charette to a land base until I got a new assignment. Well, while I was at Pearl Harbor, I had liberty so we could go to town and look around and go on bike rides, and then when I was assigned to the Charette, I found out that the ship was exactly the same as the Colohan. It was the same So I had to learn to get familiar with a new crew.
Okay, when you did the shakedown, you're on the cool hand.
Right.
When did you get to be on the charrette?
Well, when I was in Pearl Harbor, I was waiting for a new assignment,
Okay,
and the assignment was to transfer to the charrette.
okay.
And then once you get aboard ship, your life aboard ship is altogether different from being on land, of course. So I had to get used to a new crew, new captain. But the work on aboard ship is similar no matter what ship you're on. And I was fortunate to be on the same type ship I was on before. When we were assigned to a task force in the Pacific, we were screening aircraft carriers, and the task force is designed so that there's 3 or 4 carriers, 3 or 4 cruisers, and about 13 destroyers. And the destroyers are out on the perimeter, and we're supposed to protect the big ships. And we did a pretty good job of that because there were times when we encountered things that would be dangerous to the fleet. So we, like for instance, there were several times when the sonar would say, we have a contact for a submarine. So the captain would ask for permission to attack the submarine. And most of the time, we figured we had damaged the submarine. We never knew whether we sunk it or damaged it. But if there was any debris on the water, we figured at least the best we did, or the worst we did, was damage it. But we usually figured we sunk it, so we got credit for that.
So the charrette was a destroyer?
Yes.
Okay.
And there was just encounters like that gave us a reason to be there. Now there were other times when we were out in the Pacific, and sometimes the weather was so bad that we wondered if we were going to survive or not, because the ship is designed to go from one side to the other, and if it goes too far, it could tip over. So, but we never tipped over. So.
Were you caught up in that typhoon that they had?
Oh, several times, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, I got sick in the Pacific, and when there was this one particular time where we were told to attack a ship. Our assignment was to sink the ship, take survivors, and pick up whoever wanted to be picked up at the time. So when we came upon the ship, they used the 5-inch guns to sink the ship. I had no clue what kind of ship it was because it was sunk before we got to it. There were survivors all over the water, so we picked up 112 survivors and took them aboard. The first thing we did was to take all their clothes off, issue them clean clothes, and with 112 survivors, we had to give up our living quarters because we didn't have any place to put them. So
Were these Japanese people?
Well, I'm assuming you were Japanese. We didn't contact their survivors, but there was the crew that was in the forward living quarters gave up their quarters until we got into Manila, where we discharged the survivors. We took good care of the survivors because they had breakfast before we did. In other words, the crew was separated from the survivors, so we didn't have to contact them. But when we got to the Philippines, there, I think we got off the ship once.
Is that where you took the survivors, is to the Philippines?
Yeah, the Manila.
Manila?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we dropped them off there. And then we went back to our task force. Somehow or other they found them. All I know is that. And there was another instance where our task force knew that there was a hospital ship and it was going from one place to another, and they figured that it was not necessarily a hospital ship. So we were assigned to stop the hospital ship, examine what they had aboard the ship. They found out that they had contraband aboard ship. So part of our crew had to go aboard the hospital ship, and they took the officers off, brought them to our ship, and we escorted that hospital ship to Manila.
Now this was an enemy hospital ship.
It's a Japanese hospital ship, yeah.
Japanese.
And the hospital ship is not allowed to carry contraband.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the hospital ship to Manila, dropped them off. We got off the ship once again. So then we went back to our task force. Now, another time when I was out in the Pacific, we experienced a typhoon. Well, a typhoon out in the middle of the Pacific is pretty dangerous. And this one particular time when I was on the bridge, the waves were so high that I had to look up to the top of the wave to see the top of the wave. And I estimate that the bridge is 35 feet above the water, and I had to look up about 50 feet higher than that to see the top of the wave. So the waves were anywhere from 80 to 100 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unbelievable. We survived that.
My father-in-law was in that typhoon. It was the worst typhoon that anybody's ever seen.
Yeah.
They called it the Halsey typhoon.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's hard to believe that the ocean can be that bad, and there are times when the ocean is so calm, it's like a mirror. There's not a ripple of the water. Yeah. So.
It has to be pretty when it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's two extremes, but most of the time it's just, you might say, routine. Every morning you have general quarters. Every evening you have general quarters. you're screening aircraft carriers or their airplanes are taking off, you might say on a scheduled basis. They pick them up on a scheduled basis. So it's like a regular job, you know. You have the times that you're on duty and times when you're not on duty. So there's a routine aboard ship where it's like being employed by an outside company, you know, where you have your time you work, your time you go home, your time you work, your time you go home, and your free time. So we got the best of both worlds there. You had working time and free time. So there was another time when we came in for repairs in Seattle, and we had I think they split the crew into two. Half the crew went home and half the crew stayed there. And I flew home for the 2 weeks because if I took the train, I wouldn't have had any time at home. So I flew home and flew back. And while we were in Seattle, they flew me down to San Francisco to the RAN school. That lasted about a week. They flew me back home again. Not back home, but they flew me back to Seattle.